Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Historian Presents. And today we have a very special episode for you guys. We have episode number 2 of Talking Titanic with Bruce Morton. Bruce, welcome back to the show. It's awesome to have you back.
Great. It's great to be back and
Awesome.
glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we've been looking forward to this for a while now, and I'm really ready to have you back on. And we really enjoyed your last conversation, and I think many of the folks watching at home had the same feelings towards that. So, without
Mhm.
further ado, you want to give us an update and take the
Yeah,
show
sure.
away? Awesome.
So last time I talked about Ocean Gate, the company, and about the construction of the sub and its design. And so today I want to focus on the expedition itself. The
Awesome.
expedition that we had for last year was, I think it started around June 23rd, and it ended on August 7th. So it was a full 6 weeks at sea, coming in and out of port. And I'll go into the details of how we got into Canada, which was not trivial in itself, and all the other details. So
Cool.
I have some videos that are embedded in the PowerPoint, and I hope that they play. So
Yeah, they should be able to. I haven't, but this is a trial and error for me when it comes to the videos embedding. I haven't done with that yet, so
yeah.
fingers crossed.
So we'll give it a try, and if it doesn't work, what I can do instead is just point to a YouTube video that will be the homework for the people that are
That
for our
works.
review.
And we can always route that into the comments there, so when folks see that
Yeah.
video, they can
Oh yeah, sure.
click it from there and check it out at their leisure.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Go to the right window and see if we can get this there, and then we'll
All right.
start PowerPoint up, get it into the right mode. Okay, let me go to the. There we go.
Cool.
Okay, so you should see the front, the initial slide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So the Titanic expedition, as I described probably last time, it was it's a series of you could say 1 week cruises that we left from St. John's, which is the nearest port to the actual wreck site of the Titanic. St. John's is in Newfoundland. It's at the far eastern edge of the continent, actually, and it's what we did is we. Let me see. I don't know if I have. Oh yeah, here's the video. The video is right here at the beginning. I hope that this actually plays, and if you, this is kind of like a good video summary of the expedition.
All right.
Do you hear the sound?
We do.
Good. Great. All right, there's the video. Let's see if I can get to the next slide. Wait. Oh, that's not what I want. Next slide. There we go. Okay.
That was some
So
incredible
yeah,
footage, though. I like that.
yeah. We had a number of videographers, photographers on the vessel. Some of our own, some that we, some of our customers were actually our mission specialists. They had good video gear, and they took some drone videos and such. And so yeah, it was a. Uh, I forgot to tell you how long that video was, but I hope that wasn't too
Oh
long.
no, that was perfect. Absolutely
Yeah.
perfect.
So that one is on YouTube. Just look under Ocean Gate 2021 expedition, and you'll find that video. And so anyway, just to give some context, the Titanic wreck site is marked here with the star, and you can see it's about four. Well, you can't tell; there's no scale, but it's 400 miles approximately from St. John's, and Newfoundland is this island at the far eastern edge of Canada. And St. John's, this is zoomed in. St. John's is this. It's the oldest town in North America, and it is this perfect little bay that's protected from the rough ocean. And it's and St. John's is a nice little town. Didn't get to see it because of COVID. I'll tell you more about that. Here's some pictures of the coastline
Oh wow.
there, and the lower right is St. John's, the actual out inlet into the St. John's Bay. And there's another area a little further south that we went along the coast, and there's whales breaching and doing this. It was just wildlife everywhere along this rugged shoreline and sparsely populated. I mean, St. John's is a town of maybe 100,000,
Hmm.
and that's the biggest town on the island, and the rest of it's just like sparsely populated little villages throughout the area. But first, how did we? Let me step back. How did we get the sub there? Well, we basically, as you can see here on the left, we put the sub on the back of a flatbed truck, and along with shipping containers full of all of our equipment, spare parts, and gear, and it was shipped by land and then by ferry on to Newfoundland, and it got to St. John's a few days before we flew in, and they put it onto this ship. This is called the Horizon Arctic, and it is a 300-foot vessel. It's a working vessel for dropping anchor lines, towing icebergs. They do a lot of work all around the world, mainly in the North Atlantic, but they're based out of Canada. And I'll talk more about the ramp that you see that's attached to the back there. So this ramp is our launching platform. It's the way that we get the sub into the water. It's a two-step process. First of all, we lower the dive platform into the water, and then the platform itself sinks into the water, and then the sub flies off of that.
Okay.
So it's a more complicated process than what is typically done, but it's safer, and we think it's more reliable once we figured out how to do it right. Um, the way that most other subs are deployed into the water is a huge crane. Basically, you see that on the ship. There's these cranes, and we could have lifted the sub up off the deck,
Hmm.
lowered it into the water, and and done the opposite. But that has its own problems in that to do that, you have to have divers in the water to unhook and hook up the those winch lines or those uh, the yeah, those winch lines, and also there are a number of if the seas are rough, you have to actually uh, to have people inside the sub while it's hanging from a crane is not very good, and having a 25-ton sub swinging around in the air is not very safe.
Mm-mm.
So here we built this ramp, and it lowers it into the water, and and we're and these this inside this launch platform there are 4 air chambers, and those we can adjust the buoyancy by uh, dumping the air or pumping compressed air into those chambers. And so you saw how it sinks and it rises with the sub on it. And it after some trial and error, we eventually got it working right, and it worked very well. Um, so let me go back to these. I have some of these slides. I didn't have a chance to put these in the right order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip these slides and
Okay.
go talk more about the expedition, and then we'll talk about the Titanic itself. So, uh, so uh, there's one more picture I wanted to show that I could have shown last time about the sub. This is a
Sure.
great cross section view of what it's like inside the sub.
Oh wow. Let me
You see the
maximize
back
that.
dome shows. So you see it, and you see the yeah. It's like a pill. It's a cylinder with two domes on each end, and the passenger compartment is everything. You can see the window here on the right, and you can fit 5 passengers here and here. And underneath the floor, there's air tanks and batteries, and the in the back there's electronics for the interior electronics, and on the outside of the pressure chamber there's compressed air and batteries and motor drivers and thrusters and cameras and sonar and blah 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 a whole bunch of other. And so so one of the cool things that one of our passengers did at the Titanic is he made some challenge coins, and these were coins that were that he took down to the Titanic, and then he handed them out to everybody. So it was really cool. I got one of these coins,
Oh no
and
way.
so it's like this has been to the Titanic.
That is so cool.
Yeah, you know, I didn't get to go. I have something that went.
That's right.
So we got the sub there on the back of the truck. Everyone else flew in. So flying in is not was not a trivial task back in June. At that time, Canada was actually closed to all tourism, and so we were not legally able to go in, and none of our mission specialists were able to legally go in
Hmm.
as we normally would. So what we did is we were able to work with the regulations by telling the Canadian immigration people, and this was true, that we weren't actually going into Canada. We were actually only going through Canada to get to a ship, which was then going to operate in international waters. So we were we flew into Toronto and then into St. John's International Airport, and then we're not allowed to just mingle among the population there. We were basically isolated from the from the population because they wanted us tested and verified that we were not bringing COVID into the country. So we went straight from the airport to a hotel here at the DoubleTree, and we had to each take a PCR test
Hmm.
and wait for those results. So I was in this hotel room, not allowed to not just I couldn't just leave the hotel. I couldn't leave the hotel room
Oh
for
man.
36 hours. So they brought food to our doors, and so it was like a little luxury prison.
That's one way to look at it. Yeah.
So it was a nice hotel, but to be stuck in a room for that long was kind of uh, oh well. But I
I
was
can imagine.
looking. So then they took us straight to the ship, and we got right on the ship. And for 6 weeks, we were not allowed to get off the ship, essentially, and because we're these disease-ridden Americans, and and so this is the ship up close. It's the
Wow.
front third of it is like a cruise ship. It has individual cabins with their own bathrooms, and it has a galley with great food. I'll show pictures of that. And it
Cool.
has, but the back 2/3 of it is all business. It's got these huge winches and a flat deck. This is the bridge. The bridge has a front-facing bridge for driving the ship, and then there's a rear-facing bridge which is for handling all the winches and driving all the things, managing all the things going on the flat deck. And that was really cool to be up there and sit in those seats and see the ship from way up top.
Yeah, it's an amazing view out the windows up there in the bridges. Wow.
Oh yeah. And so here's the actual accommodations on the left. This is how we arranged it for the mission specialists who paid to be to join us. And the one on the right, that's my room. was a little
Oh,
bit messy.
cool.
Yeah. So I had some nice accommodations. Uh, and the food was great. Uh,
Whoa.
yeah, it was had surf and turf there on the left, and every day they would make potatoes in many different ways. I had so many different ways to make potatoes because that's a staple of Newfoundland. In fact, if you go to Newfoundland, the accent is Irish. It
Is it?
says, yeah, everybody there speaks with an Irish accent, and we even had one of our mission specialists was actually from Ireland, and I asked him, can he tell the difference between an Irish accent and a Newfoundland accent? And he said no. It sounds
No
perfectly
kidding.
authentic. In fact, he could tell. His name is Rory Golden. He was our storyteller who knows who's an expert on the Titanic, and I asked him about that, and he said that he could tell what part of Ireland someone was from or who their ancestors were from. So you can imagine someone who lives in Newfoundland today, their great grandparents came from, say, Cork, Ireland,
Hmm.
and that Cork accent stays with them today, and he could tell where what part of the of Ireland someone's ancestors were from
Yeah,
Newfoundland. That was pretty cool.
that is interesting.
We had a tour of the engine room. The tour went all the way from the bow to the stern, underneath the main deck, and it's super loud in there. And they have these huge engines that drive all the power and propulsion for the ship. And the ship has bow thrusters to go from side to side, so it could go sideways, it could spin in place, and all kinds of really cool stuff. And there's all the different systems in there. Just amazing how they're able to fit it in there. And so that was pretty cool to see that tour. St. John's, Newfoundland. This is a picture from the vessel. These pictures from the vessel, and you can see the houses there are very colorful and they're rugged built into the hills and such. And of course, here's some more pictures of the shoreline there. It got foggy and variety of weather there. I'm told that the winters there are brutal. So more about the ramp. Um, we had to figure out how to push it down the ramp and pull it back up the ramp, and we had some challenges. On one of our dives, we had rougher seas, and we had a hard time getting the sub back onto the platform and also back onto the ship. And there's a little bit of banging and bumping, but fortunately nobody got hurt. And
Good.
we have we had to do some welding of parts that broke off. We had to repair some things that got dented a little bit, and uh, but the sub was undamaged, and so it worked out fine. Um, here's some pictures of the team. The ships. There was our crew, our Ocean Gate people. There was our customers, or what we call mission specialists. We had the crew of the Horizon Arctic that were there, and we also had along with us some experts of the Titanic. In the upper left, with me, I'm there in the picture with a man named P.H. Nargeolet, and he is the one person in the world who has dove to the Titanic more than anyone else.
Wow.
Uh, he has he was the captain of the uh, Nautile, which is a French Navy um, submersible, and the Nautile was contracted by a company called RMS Titanic, which actually owns the salvage rights of the Titanic. And so when you go to Titanic exhibits in the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas. Also, there's an exhibit in Orlando that shows a large piece of the hull that was pulled up by PH. All those things were literally thousands of artifacts were picked up from the debris field and from the Titanic itself to preserve. And so he's literally done dozens and dozens of dives to the Titanic and pulled up those things. in the lower left, these were our resident archaeologists. Um, um, Bridget Buxton. She is uh, the world's most renowned underwater archaeologist.
Hmm.
She's a professor at the University of Rhode Island, and I forget her name on who's on my right. She's a PhD candidate, and so they provide the expertise on how to get to the Titanic as far as where it's located, where looking at where the sub is in relation to the Titanic wreck, and actually when we have our mission specialists are going down to the dive, PH and Bridget were there with the PH or Bridget were there in the dives to tell the people in the sub what they were looking at. Because if you go down and look at the Titanic, all you see is a bunch of hunk of rusting metal,
Mm-hmm.
and other than the bow, you really can't recognize what you're looking at. And but uh, but when you're down there with them, they can tell you what you're looking at. And so it makes it an educational experience. Here's our team, our engineering and operations team on the left, and this is on the deck of the ship on the right, where everyone had to be wearing safety gear, and it was in the month of July, and it was hot, and we thought that it would be cool, but no, it was hot. And even on the water, at the dive site, the water was about 68, 70 degrees,
Oh, geez.
which is completely unexpected after watching the movie. You think, oh, that water
Right.
must be cold all year round. No, it's the Gulf Stream passes right through that area, and the water's warm. And as you get
Okay.
closer to shore and to Newfoundland, the water is like very cold, like 40 degrees in the summertime, and
Hmm.
so it's that Gulf Stream really does affect the temperature of the water, at least on the surface. So this is more pictures of the sub on the platform in the at the dive site. And and this I like this picture in the upper right. We were taking pictures of people taking pictures of people taking pictures. So we're like, I'm taking a picture of a guy taking a picture of a guy taking a picture of a guy taking a picture. So,
I love it.
yeah, it's funny. Right, we had some downtime on the left. It's kind of hard to see, but there are some beautiful mahi swimming around the ship. When we were at sea in international waters, the leftover food that the cook had, they would just toss it off the side of the ship, and so that attracted fish. And so the crew of the vessel, they'd pop out this little platform and they would go fishing.
What?
And yeah, so they'd go
Oh,
fishing right there in
man.
the middle of international waters, and it was some really good eating that mahi. It was just, it's almost a shame because it's such a beautiful fish. It's got these blue and green and yellow stripes on it, and but there's a lot of them out there.
Oh, yeah.
Coming in and out of the port of St. John's, we had to have a pilot to guide the ship in and out, and so that was the pilot's vessel there on the right. And so the pilot ship, I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise ship, you're probably familiar with this, but the pilot basically knows where all the hazards are for coming in and out of port.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to be on the ship when we're going in and out. And so the pilot has to be taken on and off the ship with a pilot vessel. And so this ship comes right up next to our ship, and the pilot will jump off our boat onto the pilot vessel to go back into port. Okay, so let me go back up to talk about Titanic itself. Okay, so history. Wow, this is a history podcast. So let's talk about history.
Oh, the stuff you've added so far has been incredible. Like I said, it's
Yeah,
unique, and it's not, you don't really get this anywhere when you talk about, the logistics of going on an expedition and what,
oh yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
incredible. So I really appreciate you sharing all that.
yeah. It was just amazing experience. it's I'm hoping to go again this year. We'll
Oh,
see.
very cool.
So the Titanic, as we all know, was on its maiden voyage. It left uh, Southampton, England, on 10th of April, 1912. It had 2,224 passengers and crew. These are just some of the facts. I mean, you could talk hours and hours about many things, but these are some of the things that I like to share. This was the end of an era where you had um, the ship segregated between the wealthy in the first class, the semi-wealthy in the second class, and you had the poor immigrants in that were stuck down in below decks, uh, all mixed together on the same. Well, not mixed together; they were all on the same ship, but segregated. Of course, if you've ever been on a cruise, you know that's no longer the case. Anybody can go anywhere. All passengers are treated the same and eat the same. But back then, the wealthy uh, were just for like nobility, and that was part of the problem of when the Titanic sank. So it hit an iceberg on a cold, moonless night, 375 miles from Newfoundland at 11:40 p.m. And there were five. Now the ship is divided into multiple airtight compartments. The iceberg tore a gash into the starboard uh, hull, the starboard bow of the hull, and that gash breached um, five of those airtight compartments. And if it had only breached four of those airtight compartments, the ship would not have sunk, and it would have been able to continue on to New York. And it's believed that the amount of the distance of that gash that got into that fifth compartment is only
Mm-hmm.
about a couple of feet. So it's
Oh,
almost would have survived. I mean, this is just one of many instances or pieces of information where you look at it and go, "Wow, this almost was not a tragedy." But just it's like the Titanic is so interesting in that it's bad luck after bad luck after bad luck.
yeah. Oh
Um,
man.
but when the Titanic was, I was always under the impression that the iceberg that they hit was some rogue iceberg that happened to be out there where there was normally just clear seas, and that was not the case.
Hmm.
Captain Smith made some really dumb decisions in that he was trying to get to New York a day early, just to impress the press and the public, and just to kind of show how superior this vessel was. And because he was rushing so fast, like I said, it was a moonless, dark night, very hard to see. The 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 crewman who was supposed to be looking out for the icebergs that night, he misplaced his binoculars. And so he was up there just using his naked eyes. And
Mm.
if he had his binoculars, he would have been able to see the iceberg soon enough that they could have avoided it. But let me get back to the iceberg. There were icebergs all over the place. It was riddled with icebergs. In fact, the other ships that were in the water at that time had warned the Titanic to slow down, that there were lots of icebergs, and that they could hit one. Um, this was the first ever usage of SOS. It was a new thing to have a radio that could transmit Morse code. They had no voice communications. They only had they had no voice communication. They only had Morse code from ship to ship at sea at that time. And so there are only 710 survived, mostly women and children. And this was an instance where one of the reasons why so many died was because on one side of the ship, the crewman was, and I forgot his name. The crewman was letting anybody and everybody to get onto the lifeboats as fast as possible. Men, women, children, whatever. Just load them on. On
Wasn't
the other
Murdoch, was
side,
it?
what was that?
Wasn't Murdoch, was it?
I can't remember. It could be. Um, and then on the other side of the ship, uh, the crewman was loading only women and children. And so any men that wanted to get on, he would say, sorry, no, women and children only. And so there were lots of people wanting to get on. And it was kind of, and because there were uh, lots of men, it was hard to handle the press of
Hmm.
people. And they were unloading these lifeboats slowly, and they weren't able to load them quickly enough because it was actually they weren't able to get enough women and children onto those ships. Now, the part of this was a lot of people just couldn't believe that the ship would sink, and so it wasn't until it was too late before a lot of people realized that it actually was going to sink.
Right.
But it was actually pretty quick. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes for it to sink.
Mm.
Now, the the when the Titanic hit that iceberg, it was actually in view of the Californian. It was a ship that was also on the same route, uh, and well, actually, on an opposite route. And but it was late at night, and they had basically all gone to bed. And the one night watchman, he basically he turned off his radio,
Right.
so he couldn't get the SOS. He didn't get any of the radio messages from the Titanic. And when the Titanic was shooting off um, uh, flares signal flares to indicate that they were in danger, the watchman on the Californian thought that they were just celebrating, that they were lighting off fireworks. So, so just a misunderstanding of
Yeah.
messaging. The Californian could have saved everybody, and saved people from having to jump in the water and die. Now, the Carpathia, as we know, came and saved them, but the Carpathia arrived 2 hours after the sinking. So, and the water was so cold that very few people survived being in the water. So that's just a few of the interesting facts. Here's a picture of the Titanic as it was leaving Southampton.
Mm.
Um, and it was the pinnacle of luxury. To see in the upper right, you can see a sense of scale as the size of those propellers compared to the size of the person, the man standing there.
Yeah. And she had
And
three propellers, right?
yes,
Yeah.
uh, and one of them actually is still out of the. Well, it was visible. I don't know. I don't know. I think some people got some pictures. I don't have any pictures of it, but yeah, one of the propellers is sticking out
Wow.
of the mud. Now, when the bow of the Titanic hit the seafloor, it was going so fast that it buried itself. And um, if you see, of course, the Titanic is floating in the water. There's a big portion of its hull that is already underwater. The seafloor is just about 5 to 10 feet below the bottom of that anchor. So you see that bow anchor.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of give you a sense of how buried that the bow of the ship is. It's
Jeez.
about 80% buried in the muck, and so it would be nice to be able to see. Let's look at that gash that actually caused the sinking. It's all buried. That the gash caused by the iceberg is under dirt. And we were talking that it would be an interesting expedition to actually dig out the side
Right.
of the Titanic. But that would be quite an effort to dig out and to actually photograph and measure how big was that damage by the iceberg. But it's possible, but who knows? It would be expensive.
Yeah.
So here's another interesting. Of course, everyone's familiar with the grand staircase. There were actually two grand staircases. One was larger than the other. The one in the towards the bow was is this one that's photographed in the lower left. The That Cupid statue is missing. No one's been able to find it yet, but the base of that statue was found. Uh,
Really?
yes, it's actually been recovered and is in a museum somewhere, or it's in the it's owned by that company, RMS Titanic. But yeah, it would be quite a find to be able to find that Cupid statue because the base was out in the debris field. Because
Mm,
that whole grand staircase is, of course, wood paneling.
mhm.
And when the ship was sinking, that wood was, of course, buoyant, and it actually lifted up and it was ejected out of the ship. Right
Whoa.
now, if you look down into into the cavern or inside the vessel, the wreck, there's just a big rectangle of where the grand staircase was because there was a skylight and all this wood, and it just floated out uh, as it sunk. Um, and the iceberg, the actual iceberg, is the one that's photographed in the upper right. I didn't know this until recently,
No
but
kidding.
the actual iceberg that caused the Titanic to sink was a photographer on the Carpathia took a picture of it, and they're pretty sure that it was because it had paint on it,
Mm.
and so that's what it looked like. And a survivor of the Titanic, actually drew a picture of the process, and you can see that it hits the iceberg, and then it slowly sank, and then it split into two, and then when the bow or when the stern went down, it went down straight down into the water. Oh, and the lower right shows kind of gives a sense of scale of what the Titanic was compared to a modern cruise ship. So modern cruise ships are much larger, but not that much larger. A lot
Mm-mm.
wider. Yeah. So the Titanic was discovered on September 1st, 1985 by Jean-Louis Michel and Robert Ballard. Most people uh, recognize Robert Ballard, but it was actually a joint effort between the French and the Americans to find the Titanic. The French vessel that was looking during that summer, they actually uh, eliminated a lot of the possible areas, and basically there were two ships. There was a French vessel and an American vessel that were looking for the Titanic that summer, and it happened to be that Ballard, um, uh, he got lucky, and that his ship was the one that found it.
Mhm.
They were working together. It wasn't like they were working separately. The bow and aft sections are 600 meters apart, and there's a significant deterioration by what we call rusticles, which is actually bacteria that is eating away at the hull. And at the rate that it's going, the Titanic will be pretty much uh, consumed by those rusticles in probably 80 to 100 years from now.
No way.
Um, as I mentioned, there's thousands of artifacts that have been recovered, and there is actually a legal controversy about recovering artifacts from the Titanic. There are like the UK government, the Canadian government, the US government all claim some degree of control and or ownership of the Titanic. It was a What's kind of strange is that, like, for example, a U.S. court ruled that an American company, RMS Titanic Incorporated, owns the salvage rights to uh, this vessel, which never made it to America.
Hmm.
And so it's so how does an American court have jurisdiction?
Right.
It's like it's really weird. And we actually had a legal expert on the ship on the expedition to kind of explain all these things, and I didn't understand it.
Yeah, legal
So
jargon's not my suit either.
yeah, there are significant people or people in power who do not want anyone to go to the Titanic. I mean, we uh, people consider it a grave site. If you go into the Facebook groups, whenever I post onto that Titanic Facebook group, there are
Mhm.
people who always say, "Oh, leave them alone. It's a grave site. Leave the dead. They've suffered and enough, and not to be have their graves desecrated." Well, you know what? It's an archaeological site. And
Yeah.
if one were to use that same judgment and say, "Oh, you're not allowed to disturb the dead," well, then we can never learn history
No,
because we can't go and see and preserve those things that have been part of people's lives in the past.
that's right.
So
Oh, wow.
so here are more pictures of the engines are on the upper right. There's multiples of these huge engines. As you give a sense of scale, these engines are about 4 or 5 stories tall, um,
Mm.
and you saw this in the video. This picture in the lower right, that's actually like the what's called the um, it's called the I forget the name of it, but it's basically the steering wheel of the ship was mounted to that. It's called the remote engine or something like that.
Mhm.
And you can see the in the upper right the anchor. It's just a few feet above the ocean floor, and the debris field is pictured in the upper left. Uh, it's uh, it's many square miles of tiles and bottles and plates and clothes and suitcases and cables, and it's just so many different things. And it's interesting, that um, you're not going to see any bones or bodies. Those are long decayed many decades ago. Uh, and some things just do not decay. Things like, of course, glass and ceramic.
Mhm.
Um, Actually, leather doesn't decay. So, like suitcases and the contents of suitcases was preserved. Um, uh, you'd think that the steel of the hull would be preserved, but nope, it's deteriorating faster than most other things.
Jennifer on Facebook said it was a telemotor. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, there you
Yep.
go.
Okay, perfect.
Hello. So, uh, so Ocean Gate is going to do it again. The we're gonna. I'm actually not an employee of Ocean Gate anymore. I left the company because there was not, with the sub being completed.
Mhm.
I I I'm the electrical engineer. I really didn't have anything to do except for maybe make a few improvements to the sub. But I'm right now I'm a contractor for them, so that if there's things that need to be design changes or fixes, I'll do that on the side in addition to my current job.
Very cool.
So they did a national tour. They went to several cities across the U.S. To display the sub and to generate interest in this year's expedition. This year's expedition will be again late June to early August, and there's still a few seats left. So if anyone's interested, go to oceangateexpeditions.com and you can find out more. The cost is $250,000 a head. So it's uh, depending on how much money you got, it can be cheap. Some people say some people consider it a bargain. Some people don't.
Yeah.
I mean, when you consider how much it costs to go on a 15-minute space ride for Virgin Galactic, this is a bargain because this is a
Sure.
1 week expedition and you spend uh, an entire 10 hours in the sub and you spend about 4 hours at the bottom exploring the Titanic. And so that's quite an experience of a lifetime.
It is.
So there's other things that they want to do. There's other wrecks. There's other hydrothermal vents, deep sea canyons, deep sea life. But the problem is that for someone to be willing to pay to go on an expedition that may not produce any real findings, because the whole process of exploration is sometimes you're going to find something, sometimes you aren't. The thing about the Titanic is that we know where it's at, we know what we're going to see, and so it's kind of a guaranteed experience. And so that's where most of people are interested in going. So, and at that, we're almost at an hour. So, any questions?
Yeah, no, I'd love to open this up for questions because this was just an incredible show. I appreciate the slideshow too. That was really, really awesome to have it added, and even the footage you showed was just beyond incredible.
Yeah.
Do
Yep.
that. And let's see.
I'm trying to get back to the screen where am I? Oh, here we are.
Let's
How
see
do I
if we
stop? I need to stop sharing.
stop
Okay,
sharing. Oh, I can do that for you. Here.
got it.
Cool. Let's see if we have any questions left from anyone. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Do you want to tell us any real quick? We're coming up on our hour. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like to be on the expedition itself for you? Like,
Okay.
was there a lot of
Well,
drama and stuff? I remember
yeah.
last time you were talking about that.
Oh,
That
yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I didn't get into that. It was the most stressful time of my life, I have to say. So I, being the only electrical engineer, knowing all the electronics on the ship, or on the sub, if there was anything that broke, and there were things that broke that didn't work as expected or whatever, I had to fix it. And if I couldn't fix it, or if it was something that we couldn't just work around or do without, then not only would the dive be unsuccessful, we would have dozens of people who've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars all looking at me wondering why they couldn't go and see the Titanic. And so that was immensely stressful. But I fixed it. We had battery issues. We had issues with the drop weights. There was one dive where the sub had just gone through the debris field, and they wanted to get to the hull, but the sonar had stopped working. So, and it turns out we looked at the data after the fact, and they missed the bow by only about like 30 meters, and they just went right past it, and they were in the debris field. But anyway, they went through and had some time to see things, and then they were ready to come up, and there's a button on the screen where they drop the weights, and that makes the sub more buoyant, and they come to the surface. Well, they pressed that button and nothing happened. And so I had to talk them through the process of going through trying many different things so that they wouldn't have to use the emergency. We had multiple levels of safety, so that if the drop weights didn't work, we could use another method to drop another set of weights. And if that doesn't work, we have a third set of weights to get to the surface. And so there was no real concern of their safety. It's just a matter of how difficult would it be to put the new weight tray on, and it's a long story, but basically, sure. I was in this. It was kind of like an Apollo 13 moment where I'm walking them through the steps of checking this thing and checking another system, and they had to actually make a cable, and so I had to have them repurpose one cable and to use it for another purpose to possibly run these drop weight motors, and it still didn't work. But yeah, it was a long dive, and they came to the surface, and they were too buoyant because they had dropped the drop weight tray, and so they couldn't get onto that landing platform. So divers had to go into the water and manually put the sub onto that diving platform. And the
Wow.
seas were getting rougher. There were jellyfish in the water. They were getting stung.
Ooh.
Uh, it was late into the night. It took many hours to do this. It was a real ordeal. And we had, I'm not one of the divers, but I had real sympathy for those divers being in the water, out in the middle of the night in rough seas, trying to get this 25-ton sub onto this platform in the dark. And it had to be done. The people, meanwhile, the people inside are being, tossed to and fro in the waves, and now of course PH Norgely, he's the French guy. He's taking a nap inside the sub. He's not worried at all. He's done and he's got the dive and dealt with these issues many times before. But everyone else is in there is just like, what do we do? Um, but we got them up and we were able to do more dives, and we had we had 5 dives to the Titanic. We tried many more because we had issues with other things, but 2 of them were to the debris field, 2 of them were to the bow, and we had 1 dive to the stern section.
Wow.
And we had, like I mentioned, we had battery issues where one of the batteries wouldn't. It lost communication to the internal electronics, and we had to do a couple of dives with just half of the battery power, and it turned out that was fine because we over-designed the sub so that it can actually run on 1 battery, but still, it's like going on a long trip with just half a tank of gas.
Yeah.
So to answer this question from Barbara, when we went to St. John's, because of COVID restrictions, we were only able to go onto the ship, and at the end of the dive, or at the end of the expedition, they took us straight from the port to the airport, and we couldn't do anything in between. It's like this. We could see all these great things we'd like to see in the town, and this beautiful castle that's on the top of the hill there. Wanted to see that, but nope. Maybe next year, or maybe this summer.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you go this year, maybe they'll be a little laxed on the COVID stuff this year.
So yeah, but the plan is that for this year's expedition, I think this is my personal opinion. I think that they're going to need me on there in case there's any electrical issues. They have technicians, but they don't have the expertise, and so I'm hoping to be able to go again.
Well, that would be incredible.
So yeah, we had it was quite an adventure.
Good.
And I tell you, being at sea for 6 weeks and missing the beautiful summer here in the Northwest, where I live, I was like so done. I was like, oh, I was just mentally and physically exhausted. But the weird thing about memory is that after a month of relaxing at home and taking some time off and time to think, I was ready to get going and do it again.
Right. Did you a question for me actually, did it feel weird being on a ship for 6 weeks and then getting back on land? Like, did it feel weird? Like, was it like an adjustment on walking again on a flat surface, or did it feel like there was a lot of rocking when you're on this ship or anything of that nature?
Okay, well, there's one of those questions of if you had a superpower, what would it be? Well, my superpower is that I don't get seasick.
Awesome.
So there were some days where the seas were rough. I mean, walking down the hallway was a real challenge. I mean, you had to hold on to the handrails to get down there. But for me, it's like it didn't affect me at all. I could eat. Yeah, other people are like throwing up. They got these little patches behind the ear. Some people just couldn't. They were in their rooms just like dealing with the waves and stuff. For me, I could lay in my bunk, and the waves would just kind of like the motion of the ship would push me down into the bed and lift me up out of the bed, and it was like awesome. It was just like it felt like I was being rocked like a baby. I loved it.
I bet sleep was good then. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I slept through it. But yeah, coming back on to land, the weird thing was just being disconnected from everything going on, because we had internet on the ship, but it was very limited, and I
Mhm.
was scared. And so, in late June, it looked like the pandemic was going to be over and everything was going to be fine. And by the time I got back, I expected that, yeah, we'll be it's on the all clear. But no, during the time from late June to early August, the Delta variant came along, and
Yep.
it was like everybody's like, ah, hair on fire. And so I was like, oh,
Yeah.
dang, I like back into this. It was so nice being, everybody was in the bubble on the ship. No
Mhm.
mask, no distancing, no concerns whatsoever, and then to be back into the real world where everyone's like masked up, and just it was a real letdown. But yeah,
I can imagine. It's like that taste of being able to be out of the pandemic and then just kinda thrown right back into it as soon as you come
yeah,
into port.
exactly.
God,
Yeah.
that would make for a heck of a trip.
Mhm.
Well, Bruce, it looks like we are out of time here, unfortunately. But again, if you have anything that comes up that you want to talk about, this is absolutely a place we welcome you here to come
Yeah.
talk. 'Cause we've had just tremendous talks here, and I really enjoy you coming on and sharing your experience on that. Because it's unique. Not many people get to have that opportunity to say that they've even been to the site of where the Titanic's at,
Well,
let alone do the cool stuff you've done with the sub. I mean, that is really cool. And like I said, I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us here.
mhm. My
Um,
pleasure.
you
I
mentioned
think we should
genealogy.
do one more thing. We should do one more session,
Okay.
and on that one, I will talk about how to connect your viewers with the Titanic.
That
I
would
am
be
an amateur
awesome.
genealogist, and one of the presentation I gave a presentation to the passengers on the ship
Mhm.
about how to find relatives on the Titanic. Now, when I'm not talking about ancestors, I'm talking about relatives, like distant cousins. Like, how
Right.
can you find how you're related to people on the Titanic? Well, I will tell you how to do that, and so I'll show you some interesting stories about that too.
Well, that sounds like a plan. We'll be in touch about when that can happen. 'Cause I'm sure a lot of our folks would love to find out what their connection is with the Titanic. I would love to find out what my connection is. 'Cause I
Yeah.
always wonder what got all of us, there's a lot of people that are very interested in this ship, and there's gotta be something that causes us to all be so interested in it, and I think
Oh yeah.
there might just be that connection.
Yeah, and having a connection, it's like, oh wow, that was my sixth cousin. That was when you're reading about the Titanic to know, oh wow, I'm related to that person. It's it's a connection that just brings it to a whole nother level. And I can show you. And what I'll tell you about is not only going to be applicable to the Titanic, but for anything. If
Mhm.
there's a if there's a significant person in history, you can I will show you some resources on how to find out how you're related to that person if you're related to them at all.
Well, we would appreciate that, and genealogy is something that a lot of us, especially even with the Civil War and like Revolutionary War stuff, we always try to find what generals are we related to or who took place in what
Mhm.
battle. So that would help a lot of our viewers
Yeah,
maybe find their place not only in the Titanic but just in history in general.
yeah,
So yeah, well,
yeah.
Bruce, thank you.
My ancestors are mostly from the South, and they fought in the South. So,
Same. I had a lot of Southern ancestors. I found two Union ones recently, so I've been like all over that. Like that's kind of cool, but yeah, most of them were from the South.
yeah,
Being in Virginia, I mean that's kind of a
yeah,
given here.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
alrighty. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
All right, and we'll see you next time.
Yep.
All right, Bruce, take care, bud. And folks, thank you guys again for tuning in. You guys have a good one.